So welcome to Toys in the Hood. Today we're going to talk about Space Marine 2nd edition rulebook. So first, a bit of an introduction. Space Marine was the kind of flagship of the Epic system back in the late 80s, 90s. The original game, Adeptus Titanicus, was very much about Warlord Titans beating the crap out of each other, and then Space Marine, the 1st edition, introduced infantry into that mix as well. All of these games are the Epic system, so Epic models at the time, they've got a bit bigger nowadays. They were about 6mm high compared to a Marine, which at the time would have been about 28-30mm high. So you can see a Marine is like 5 times the size in Warhammer 40,000 than they are in Epic. Now this means that you can have massive like tank platoons, you can have giant robots, you know, Warlord Titans, you can have massive pieces of artillery like the Ordinatus, the Adeptus Mechanicus uses, can all go on the table, and you can still fight this in an afternoon. You know, you can play it on your kitchen table, have these epic games. And the name is perfect for it. So there was 1st edition. What I'm looking at is Space Marine 2nd edition, which brought everything from the Horus Heresy, so the world of the 30,000, into Warhammer 40,000. So I'll talk about the box set in a moment, and then there were different rules for, they kind of tidied up the previous rules. I haven't played the 1st edition stuff, so I don't really know what those changes are, so I'm just going to talk about it all at face value, kind of what I know. There were then supplements that came out. I've got to review in later videos. My friend has very kindly lent me Armies of the Imperium. This covers, well, the armies of the Imperium, so Space Marines and Guard. There's Renegades. This book includes Chaos Space Marines, well, Chaos Forces in general, and Eldar. And then I've also got the book for Ork and Squat Warlords. That, unsurprisingly, covers Ork and Squats. So I'm going to look at those in future videos. In fact, my mate's lent me a load of stuff for Epic. It's really cool. I've also got copies of Titan Legions. So I'm going to make a series of videos about this. But I wanted to start with the Space Marine, really the rule book, because I don't own the box set, but I'm going to talk about the box set just to give you a kind of sense of where this all came in. Space Marine 2nd edition was one of the first games that I bought. I must have been 12 years old when I got it. My mum took me down to Games Workshop Birmingham. I used to live in Stratford-on-Avon, so it's a real pilgrimage down there. We went to the store, they sold me Space Marine, they then upsold my mum with some paintbrushes and the paint set, which was pretty useful at the time, because otherwise I wouldn't have really been able to do anything with them. And yeah, and I got this amazing box back home and just ripped it apart. It was absolutely brilliant. I talked more about the kind of previews and overviews of Space Marine in my White Dwarf 141 episode. That was my very first White Dwarf that had a preview of Space Marine, and I think that's why I've always been really excited about Space Marines. So here's the cover of the box set. You can see there's lots of Ultramarines on the front. There's 2 Warlord Titans, there's a Reaver Titan. And this box was packed full of stuff. There were 3 entire armies in here. You got Orks, Eldar, and of course Space Marines. And then the Space Marines, they also had a Warlord Titan to use. It was packed full of stuff. So what you got was you got a 64-page rulebook, which had rules and background. You had 546 epic scale miniatures, 12 Land Raiders, 24 Rhinos, 240 Space Marines. So you're literally 2.5 battle companies of Space Marines in the starter set. You get 12 Eldar Grav Tanks, 120 Eldar Guardians, 18 Ork Battle Wagons, 120 Ork Warboys, and then a Warlord Titan. The Warlord Titan had optional modular weapons that you could change around as well. Now, to think 120 Orks, you know, is an awful lot. With Epic, you have 5 models on a base. Okay, so those 120 Orks are actually just 24 bases. But it was plenty to get going with. You then also got coloured card buildings. So these were printed card buildings. They had plastic roofs, and the roofs was kind of a bit like the Hero Quest scenery used to be. It's the cardboard would push into the plastic roof, and that creates quite a solid piece of kit. So the scenery really would last, which was great, especially at the time when I'd be throwing it basically into ice cream cartons for storage. You got 140 counters, you got reference sheets, you then got army cards. I'll talk about these in the other box sets where I've got the examples of them, but the army cards basically told you what you would get and the points cost. So a Space Marine Battle Company would give you 10 Rhinos and 100 Marines, and you would use those to work your armies out. Different armies had different effects, so like Tyranids actually had hexagonal ones, and you built up a hive. It's a really cool way of doing it. This is the Space Marine rulebook. Black and white, it's stapled together there. You can see this one, I mean, it's just a soft paper cover. The artwork is from the box set, front of the box set. They've only taken part of it. It's kind of common practice. I think they do it a lot. Games Workshop do it. Then other companies in the war games industry do as well. I remember when I worked for Warlord Games, they do this. Is once you've commissioned a piece of artwork, of course, it's quite expensive. So you want to use it as often as you can and in whatever way you can. So kind of cutting bits out of it for different ideas is ideal. So if you wanted to do the box set of a Warlord Titan, why not use that part of it? Well, you wouldn't use that part because that's a Reaver Titan, but if you want to do a box set of a Reaver Titan, why not use that bit? If you want to do Space Marines, use that bit. So we do see artwork recycled a lot in these books. Right from the start, it's written by Jervis Johnson and Rick Priestley. We've got 4 Marines here. We've got Space Wolves, Ultramarines, Dark Angels and Blood Angels. They all look more or less the same at this point. Well, firstly, it's epic, so the model's very small. There's not much to convert and tell them a difference apart from the colour. And also, they've not been producing accessory sprues to make models your own at this point. So all Space Marines largely look the same apart from the colour. Then the contents. So we've got an overview of the Space Marine world in the background. We've got the rules, and then we've got the force lists. So I'll jump straight into those. The Space Marine game. I mean, talking of recycled artwork, I think this is a brilliant piece, this Titan over here. But I also remember this being in a copies of Space Crusade when they talk about the Age of Imperium in that. So I think this has been used more than a few times. But it's a cool piece, so why not? It gives you a general overview of the races there, like a really general overview. Then it gets into it a bit more here. Talks about the Imperium. The Imperium at this point is more directly run by the priesthood. It doesn't seem to be as much nowadays. Like Space Marines have a lot more free reign now, whereas at the time they answered to the priesthood. The priesthood could send the Space Marines out. Talks about Space Marines being humanity's finest. Talks about Imperial Guard. The one thing that's really interesting here is we talk about Ogryns, Rattlings, half men and half animal beastmen. These are no longer in the Imperial Guard armies. I suppose Ogryns still are, sorry. You've then got the Titan Legions. And then it talks about the Knight World. Now, I love Imperial Knights. I've got a huge army of them. Rather than being massive feudal systems, the Imperial Knights are more explorers. They're the first people to get to planets. And they've then used their knights to be able to harvest what are essentially dinosaurs. They also live on these same feudal worlds where they live. The Eldar Exodites live. Now, Exodites use both knights, they use their Eldar knights, and they also ride their own dinosaurs. There's a really cool part of the background here that is sort of, it's dipped into occasionally. I'd really love to see more stuff. We've then got the squat homeworlds here. The squats nowadays have kind of come back as the League of Vatan, but they did sort of disappear for a while. It is interesting that squats are divided into leagues, so you know there is a bit of a connection there between the squats and the League of Catan. It's League of Vatan, even though the backgrounds have changed. And then we have Orks, how Orks basically delight in fighting. Eldar Craft Worlds, and then again Eldar Knights are introduced there. And then Chaos, talks about Chaos and the Demon Worlds, Demon Princes, how the Chaos Space Marines were beaten during the Horus Heresy. So these are the game components. So you can see there's the troop stands. You have 5 models on a stand there. You've got vehicles. These are all just single solid piece of plastic that are on sprues. The Falcon Grav Tank there, very unlike the Eldar Grav Tank nowadays. But the other vehicles are pretty similar. You've got a multi-piece Titan. One of the things with Titan is it had a void shield counter underneath, so you could basically, as it lost void shields, you just dial it down to keep track of it. There's then counters including here, so you've got objective markers, rubble markers, which would match up to the buildings when they were destroyed, the old vortex template there, a barrage burst, and then order counters. Order counters become key later on, and then these are the cards that I mentioned earlier that you use to build your army with. The dice, so you've got scatter dice. What instead you have is dice that say up and down or left and right. They're used for when you're shooting at Titans and trying to target specific areas. So starting the game, first up you use cards and you build up an army. So every card has a points value. You can see this one here. This is the Space Marine Tactical Company. Space Marine Tactical Company consists of 1 HQ unit plus 3 tactical detachments. So you have your HQ unit, which is a rhino and 1 stand of 5. And then all of the other rhinos have 2 stands in. So you basically end up with, each stand is 5 men. So you have 3 units of 30 and a leader with 5 men. So there's 95 models in a tactical company, and there's 10 rhinos that go in there as well. And that would cost you 750 points. The command stand would have a banner added to the back of their base so you could see them. Let's not forget we've got a great piece of artwork here. We've got an Eldar Titan fighting against Orks. Now these Orks are all using looted rhinos. Everything has to stay in formation during the game, so Land Raiders have to stay within 6 centimetres of each other. One thing worth noting at this point is Epic Space Marine is played in centimetres rather than inches. I think that makes more sense. I've played other war games where the smaller scale, if you play in centimetres, essentially you can play, you could almost upscale just by turning the centimetres to inches and vice versa. You divide the table into 2 foot by 2 foot areas, roll a d6 and halve it, and that tells you how many pieces of terrain that go in there. You then roll on a terrain table, and basically that's how you build your battlefield, is randomly. Alternatively, you can have one player sets up the terrain and the other person chooses it. You then place objectives, so it's about objective control. There's 16 objective counters, 8 blue ones and 8 red ones. You basically take 4 each and lay those out. You'll change the colour depending on who controls them. And then the armies set up 80 centimetres away from each other, and off they go. It's a very straightforward way of setting up, in that you're lining up on one side of the battlefield, your opponent's lining up on the other. And you set up secretly, so you either had to put a barricade up in the middle of your table so that you couldn't see what your opponent was doing, or you would draw a map and sort of write down where people set up. So the sequence of play is you do have an order phase, movement phase, combat phase and end phase. The orders phase, this for me felt really kind of revolutionary when we started playing it. You give your troops orders. So you have different tokens. So there's first fire, which basically means that you're telling your troops that they stand still and they will focus on shooting. You can then give them an advance, which means troops move forward and shoot, or you can charge, which means you basically move at double speed flat out to get towards the enemy. And you would put these order counters down beforehand, and essentially they all go face down, and so you've committed to what you're doing before you know what your opponent does. And you don't know who goes first until all the counters are down, and you then roll to see who has initiative and who's going to move first or second. You then reveal those orders. And if you haven't given your troops an order counter, then they're not allowed to advance. They can only shoot, but they shoot in the advanced fire segment, which basically means they're slower than first fire troops. So you really want to be giving people orders. But because there's command units in this game, sometimes, for whatever reason, if you're not near a command unit, you cannot be issued an order. So you're basically stuck standing still and just shooting. So whoever's got the initiative chooses whether to move first or second. One side moves all their models, then the second one moves all of theirs. Moving troops is pretty straightforward. If you've charged, you move at this point, you move double. There's transport vehicles that can carry other units. There's skimmers that then ignore scenery. And because they hover, they can also do, if they've got a first fire order, rather than move, what they do is essentially they do a pop-up attack. So they just go straight upwards, shoot, and then drop down again. So with the combat phase, you basically alternate between players taking their turns, starting with the person who won the initiative. You do the first fire orders first, then you have close combat, then the remaining advance order troops may fire. So there's a definite advantage to first fire in that you can take out troops before they've been able to fight in combat and before they've been able to shoot you. And you literally just alternate. Models in different units can split fire, but you have to say where you're firing before you roll the dice. You're not allowed to pre-measure. You have to rely a lot on your judgment for that. And then to hit is just a case of looking at the data sheet and you're basically trying to roll over what your to hit score is. We'll see some of those in a moment. Weapons on vehicles can fire 180 degrees to their front. You then have barrages. Now barrages fire templates at your target. If you can see them, it's a direct barrage. It's not very likely to scatter, but if you can't see them, then the chances of them scattering away and missing are quite high. They basically scatter further, but it does mean that you can hide your artillery away behind something, and obviously you can't be shot back in return. You can only fire at command units if they're the closest enemy to you, and then everything has an armour save as well, which is just a case of roll a d6, and if you go over the armour save, then jobs are good. And some weapons have armour save modifiers that will make it harder for you to save. And if you shoot a vehicle in the side, there's a -1 modifier, and if you shoot them in the rear, there's -2. And you can sometimes actually need a 7, 8 or 9 to hit if there's negative modifiers. What you do there is you need to roll a 6 on 1d6, then you roll a second dice. To get a 7, you need a 4 or more. If you need an 8, you need a 5 or more, or a 9, you basically need another 6. And when you shoot a Titan, you use the aiming dice, which are the dice that say either up or down, left and right, and you roll those, and that's basically the chance that you are of hitting, say you're aiming for the centre of the Titan, instead you might just hit its shoulder, take out its weapon, rather than actually destroy it. And some Titans can self-repair, and then some Titans have shields as well. Power shields that Gargants have, when they're taken down, they go, but void shields that the Imperium have, void shields can regenerate as the game goes on. And then you've got the vortex missile. The vortex missile basically rips a hole into the warp. It's full of dark energy. Anything it hits will destroy. Anything but a Titan. So a Titan suffers d6 hits if it's hit, but anything else is just, if it's touched by the vortex missile template, it dies. Vortex templates as well, when you fire a vortex missile, the vortex sits on the table. You roll a d6 every turn, and it can either just disappear, stay where it is, or it moves 2d6 centimetres in a random direction. So there is the possibility that you think everything's okay, and suddenly a vortex is just moving towards you and sucking your troops into a black hole. Close combat's really nice and straightforward. You basically roll 2d6 and you add, well, a CAF, which is a close assault factor. If you roll the highest, then your opponent is eliminated. If there's multiple combats, the multiple attackers get to roll 2d6, then they roll an extra d6 every time that they fight. So the first attack will just be a normal 2d6. The next person that attacks the same target will get 3d6, then 4d6. So you can gradually wear people down. You've got cool Titan close combat weapons. You've got chain fists that give them an extra. So rather than rolling 2d6 in your close assault factor, you roll 3d6. There's a power fist, gives you a chance to rip parts away from the Titan, to rip bits off them. And then there's a laser burner, which basically cuts its way into the power system of the other Titans and can do several hits at once. And then lastly, there's the end phase. You add up victory points. Most of these are gained by objective counters. You get 5 victory points per objective counter. And then armies have a break point. Basically, when you've taken a number of those casualties equal to the break point, they become broken, and then there's a chance that the troops will flee the battlefield. What you do is when you break a unit, you flip their army card over, and on the reverse is the number of victory points that you gain. Don't have to take all of the objectives. If you wish, you can just destroy the enemy. There's morale checks. Once you've had casualties equal to your breakpoint, you're broken. You then basically roll a d6. If it's equal or greater than your morale value, you've passed. If it's lower, then you begin to fall back and retreat off the battlefield. This is moving double rate as if you had charge, except you're moving away from the enemy. And you can try to regroup, but of course if they leave the battlefield, they're gone and they're dead. Now this is the epic forces. This is how you build your army. You have different cards here. You've got special cards that you use, which represent special troops. So the example there is a chaplain. There's then something like the Space Marine Land Raider Company, the Space Marine Tactical Battle Company. They become the company cards, and then for every company card you can have support cards. So for example there it's a Space Marine Veteran Detachment. So you have to have one company card, and then each company card allows you to take 5 support cards and 1 special card. So it's quite a sensible way of building army lists. You don't have to worry about percentages or anything like that. You are just pulling out cards, building your army with those. So on to the forces of the Imperium. So we've got the Space Marines here. The 4 Space Marines that are on the cover, the Space Wolves, Dark Angels, Ultramarines and Blood Angels. The Space Marines have Assault Space Marines, Devastator Space Marines and Tactical Space Marines. As you'd expect, Assault Marines are slightly faster. They move 15 centimetres. Most other Marines move 10 centimetres. Their close assault factor is +4 for the HQ unit, +3 for the Assault Marines and +2 for the Devastator Marines, the Tactical Marines. So as I said, in close combat you roll 2 dice and then you add that to it, add the CAF to it. Weapons stats are pretty straightforward. So bolters, range 50 centimetres, they roll a single dice per unit. You need a 5+ to hit, and there's no save modifier there. Then you get veteran scouts and terminators. The terminators actually get a saving throw. None of the others get a saving throw. So when you play from Warhammer 40,000 to move to Epic, it's a bit of a shock there. Terminators have a saving throw of a mighty 6+. Space Marines can have different command units. So they can have chaplains, which give troops within 10 centimetres a +1 bonus to hit in combat. Sorry, a +1 bonus to their CAF. And then the medics, they give Imperial troops within 10 centimetres a save on a 5+. So those would be the special units that you could add. Thing on the Land Raider. So we're on our first vehicle here. Vehicles get a lot more heavily armoured compared to troops. So the Land Raider has a saving throw of 2+. It's better in close combat than most of the Space Marines we've seen so far, as it gets +3, and it's then armed with a las cannon. So the mighty las cannon has a range of 75 centimetres. It rolls 2 attack dice, which is great, but it only hits on a 5+, and then the target gets a save modifier of -2. The Land Raiders are great for carrying troops, as they can carry 2 troop stands. I've got rhinos, Imperial bikes, land speeders, so skimmers can do these pop-up attacks where they just appear and attack out of nowhere. The whirlwind missile carriers already in the game. I think it's really cool to see. There's a lot of things that kind of felt like they were introduced to Warhammer 40,000 a lot later on, but you see them first in Epic, and I just think they're really, really awesome, like the Vindicator heavy support tank. So the special thing about Orks is the Ork command rule. So you have to make sure that there is a commander of some sort, so it could be a war boss, warlord, or a knob, has to be within 10 centimetres of a unit of Orks. Otherwise, they follow their natural instincts, and their natural instincts are largely to squabble amongst themselves and to shoot at anyone who comes within about 10 centimetres. Sorry, 25 centimetres. The exceptions are the snakebites, who will move towards the enemy and try to close the distance and try to get into close combat, and then Goths, who also must run forward and charge if they can. Then got this piece of artwork here of Orks fighting against Warlord Titans. I do not fancy their chances. So we've got knobs, war bosses, different Ork boys. There's no real difference between the different types of Ork boys in the game, apart from the fact Bad Moons, who are better equipped, have a -2 save modifier. Bad Moon's teeth grow quicker, and Orks use teeth as currency, so Bad Moons are naturally richer, so they could buy the better weapons. Goths, they're the more militant of them. They have a target save modifier of -1 when they shoot, so they've got better equipment. However, their range is shorter at just 25 centimetres, but they are better in close combat, and snakebites are better in close combat. You've got boar boys. So Ork mech boys can make tractor cannons. These basically shoot like a kind of gravity gun, and what happens is you either immobilise your target, or if your target isn't very heavily armoured, you can just squash and destroy the target immediately. Got bike boys, storm boys, Gretchen. These are all units that you see on the table of Warhammer 40,000. Your battle wagon, which is broadly comparable to a Rhino looking at this, except that it's got slightly better weaponry because it's armed with an autocannon. Got the Lungburster battle tank. Now this old drawing here, that looks like one of the... Is it the Goliaths that the Gene Stealer cults use? They have these kind of mining vehicles. This looks very similar to it, with the kind of cupola on the side. Now back in this time, Orks have Mad Boys. So all Orks are a little crazy, it's fair to say, but Mad Boys are particularly... insane. What you do is you roll for them to see what they do. Now, a 2d6 there, so your most common result is going to be a 7, which is basically people argue about the plan and they just don't do anything. But with your highest rolls, the Mad Boys can actually channel their psychic energy, their innate psychic energy, and basically go and blow up tanks. It's pretty crazy. Another unique to Epic weapon is the Weird Boy Battle Tower. This is basically a battle wagon with a tower built on it that has a Weird Boy. Weird Boys are Orks they're Ork psychers, but they're very much powered by the other Orks around them. And what happens is you basically take your battle tower, you measure how many Orks are something like, I think it's within 25 centimetres, and that gives you energy points. The more Orks that are around you, especially if those Orks are fighting, then the more powerful weapon that you end up with. And you can see here, so 1 to 5 energy points, it's little range, 25 centimetres, attack dice 1 to hit on a 6. It's basically a bolt gun. But when you get all the way up and there's loads of fighting going on and there's loads of Orks there, then you get 26 plus, and you've got a range of 2 metres, you've got 8 attack dice, and you hit on a 2 plus with a -5 save modifier, which just means basically whatever you shoot, you will kill. It's a really, really cool idea. Of course, the problem with that kind of much energy is that there is the possibility that Weird Boy's head explodes. But, you know, you're going to win some, you lose some. So then we have Eldar. Eldar are basically built in the same way as Space Marines, so you have 1 company card, you then have 5 support cards and 1 special card. But they don't have command units in their forces in the same way Space Marines do. What you have to do instead is you buy warlocks separately. You then have to distribute these warlocks around your forces, and basically to make sure that you give out commands. You've then got Guardians, very straightforward, they move 10, same as everyone else, they've got no save. Their CAF is 0, so they're rubbish in close combat, but they're not bad shots with their shuriken catapults that hit on 5 pluses and just roll 1 dice and have a range of 50 centimetres. On the whole, basic infantry in this game are still pretty pants. It's very much about the vehicles. In fact, you see that immediately with the Falcon Grav tank, which is 25 centimetres, moves faster, it's a save of 3 plus, its CAF is +1, it's got a las cannon. It's just so much better than infantry in this game. Warlocks, as well as being command units, also have psychic powers. These are quite full on. You sort of, if you use a mind blast, you basically choose a target from 25 centimetres, roll a dice, and on a 4, 5 or 6, then they take a hit. No save and throw allowed against it. They can even target Titans without, although void shields, or in fact any shield, can stop psychic powers. Otherwise you just get a bit silly. It's just infantry units wiping out these giant battle robots. There's a psychic lock, which stops something moving. Then there's an Eldritch Storm, and Eldritch Storm also just pins troops down and serves to block line of sight. They've got their weapon platforms, the anti-grav las cannon. So they've got aspect warriors. So you've got your swooping hawks, your dire avengers, your dark reapers, fire dragons, howling banshees, striking scorpions. The shining spears and the warp spiders don't exist at this point. They're kind of what you would expect them to be. The howling banshees and striking scorpions are really good in combat, actually. The dark reapers missile launcher is a really, really good shooting weapon with 2 dice, hitting on 4s, -1 to save modifier. You've then got Exarchs. They're also incredibly good. In fact, everything I've just said about infantry, I feel may be wrong as far as Eldar are concerned. They seem to be absolutely brilliant. And Harlequins are also great in close combat. There's the jet bike, Viper jet bike, and Tempest. All of these are skimmer weapons, so you can just set them up behind. And then vibro cannons. Vibro cannons draw a line across the battlefield. They basically work by making the ground shake. And so you draw a line on the battlefield, and any troops that are on that line are hit by it. Then we get to Titans. We've got a whole range of weapons for Titans, and they are an army in themselves, Titans are, although at this point they haven't actually got anything extra. The idea is a Warlord Titan would be its own company, and then you can have 5 Titan support cards and then a Titan special card. We don't really see much of this until Titan Legion, I believe, and Titan Legions really goes out its way to bring Imperial Knights in. You've got like Titan Honor Guard and things like that. So the weapons Imperial Titans have, they have Quake Cannons, Gatling Blasters, Laser Blasters, Chain Fists, Rocket Launchers, Plasma Cannons, Vortex Missiles, which, you know, Vortex Missiles have its own special rule in the book. Plasma Destructors, Volcano Cannons, Melter Cannons, Power Fists, and Laser Burners. Quite a nice bit here was, as well as giving you the kind of synopsis of what the weapon's about, you've also got a little picture of them, which, bear in mind, you're building these out of plastic kits. It's really important to know what they are. I mean, you could probably work out what a Chain Fist is, but trying to tell the difference between a Gatling Blaster, a Quake Cannon, and a Plasma Destructor, I think, is something else. Volcano Cannons I always remember as the macro cannons, the idea that these are actually planetary defense weapons. And we just get the data sheets here. So the data sheets are just summaries of the rules, which, bearing in mind, a lot of the text describing the units is just flavour text in this, so it doesn't matter too much that it summarises these. But at this point, remember, there's a lot of epic models out there that aren't included in this game that haven't had much of a write-up. So just for example, looking at the Orks, there's the Skullhammer Battle Fortress, the Bone Cruncher, the Bone Breaker, the Brain Crusher, the Bowel Burner. None of these are in this box set, and you don't get the cards for them either. You have to buy these separate box set to get those. But at least this way you can still play with your existing models. That's kind of cool. I'm trying to think what jumps out here. There's nothing new in the Orks there. Imperial datasheet, you've got the Termite, the Mole, and the Hellboar. We'll talk about those when we look at Armies of the Imperium. The same with the landing pods that they have. At this point, the squads should have the Attack Squad, Combat Squad, Warlord, Hearthguard, Guild Bikers, and Guild Trikes. Now, later on, squads get some of the coolest, biggest weapons going. It's quite awesome. You have the mail order section that shows you what you can order, so what you've not got here. So these are all metal models, whereas the ones in the sets are plastic. You've got the Bane Blade and the Shadow Sword. And I remember the plastic model coming out in about 2008, I guess it was, that the Bane Blade came out. That was really, really cool. It's so awesome to think that they're still in the game. They were in the game 20 years earlier, just in Epic. You've got the Lehman Russ Battle Tank, Predator, Whirlwind, drop pods. These are very spherical, the drop pods are here. So you've got the deployed drop pod shell, and then you basically put something in the middle to make it a different drop pod. So you could have an assault pod, a support pod, or a death wind. And here's the Ork vehicles. Some of these just giant sort of fortresses on wheels. Really, really awesome. And then just a rule summary at the back. As we said, there's the terrain table, which shows you essentially whether you're putting woods, hills, or towns on your table when you set up. All the terrain rules are here. Different stadium and close buildings. Victory point summary, the number of victory points that you require to win a game depending on the battle size, how barrage points work. So the more barrage points you have, the easier it is to hit. And then just a nice simple rule summary there. Thanks for listening. So that was Space Marine 2nd edition, the rulebook. It's really quite straightforward, and there's 60 odd pages, black and white. Lots of the rules only take up about half the book. A lot of it's the specific army rules there. Lots of great stuff, so you could start playing whatever your collection was. Like I say, the rules are nice and simple and straightforward. It's probably why 11-year-old me was able to pick it up and really, really enjoy it. It was a lot easier than going through like the Warhammer 40,000 rulebook, which I felt needed a lot more work. This, you basically got a load of your models, you got the cards, and you just started rolling dice and playing. It was really, really good fun. Now, There'd be extra expansions, like I say, the Age of the Imperium box set. I'll look at that. Then there's Renegades. I'm going to take a look at those. I've got the rulebooks for Titan Legions as well, so I'm going to go through those. It's an exciting time for Epic at the moment with the new Horus Heresy game coming out for it. So I wanted to talk about kind of where it all began. So, hopefully you enjoyed this. Please like, subscribe, share with your friends, and I'll be producing loads more Warhammer 40,000 stuff and Epic over the next, few months. Cheers. Thank you. Bye.